is pretty steep. Uh, so we have had an APC agreement with BMJ for a very long time, BMJ case reports. Several of you may have benefited from that. But it is just a journal of case reports. So the IQAC cell, the Dean Quality of Planning, and even the VC ma'am were telling us for a very long time that we should take an APC package from some publisher so that our authors can publish articles in their journals without paying the APC charges. So we have been working on this for some time now, and we have narrowed down Karger. We are trying to get this. So they have this read and publish package. We are looking at that. So that is why we wanted to do this workshop to let you know, to give you a snapshot into what Karger has to offer. We had hoped for a more attendance, but unfortunately several sessions are going on in the university simultaneously. So we have a pediatric surgery department's foundation day program. We also have a NAC council program, which is we are preparing for that. So NAC is the National Accreditation Council. We have several things going on at the same time. That is why probably the attendance is a little thing. So we have here several good guys from Kargar. Christian is here, Inish is here, and Francesca is here. They will take us through what Kargar has to offer to us in terms of their read and publish agreement. Priyank, you want to take over? Yeah.
Wow, what a morning we've had already. We started at 6. We landed at the airport at 6:15. Flight was boarding time is 7:15. I had Digi Yatra and they didn't, so they were stuck. So we took just in time, a little too far. We landed, almost landed, and the pilot decided, though, we need to do another round. So it took another 20 minutes. But yeah, finally we are here, and we're very, very thankful that you gave us this opportunity. And thank you, sir, for giving us the opportunity to partner with the university to provide a read and publish. Today we are trying to give you a flavor of what we are covering with this agreement, and also show you what it takes to publish with Karger. And I think some of the principles and some of the accesses that we are providing along with the read and publish would give you a sense of how we are partnering with KGMU. Friend, if I can request you to please come over.
Is here?
पेनड्राइव लगा हुआ है इसमें
They're the same. One is square, one is 69. Whatever is better.
Second number we will बताओ अगले के लिए ठीक है ये ऑन करो
Oh, I can't see the notes, right? Can I see? Oh, okay. So I can see the notes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah? What it is? If I do presenter view, no. That doesn't work. No, because you can. No, it's fine. It's, you're sharing the screen. No, I was the notes. It's fine. It was for the notes. No, but it's fine. You're sharing the screen. So
आगे पीछे से होगा
can do without the notes. It's fine. Just
All right. Thanks for your patience. So, hello everybody. My name is Francesca Brazzarotto. I'm the customer engagement manager for Karger. And today I will just run through some of the titles that we publish, some of the content we create for researchers and clinicians. And we like to really share with you as well what you might be have access to once this agreement will be put in place. I take care of creating events for researchers, trainings and so forth, so I will share some of those today with you, and I hope you'll be able to register. So without further ado, just a quick overview of Karger. We are a family-run Swiss publisher. We've been founded in 1890. We are based in Basel, Switzerland, and we've been publishing only medical and health science content for the past over 130 years. So that's all we do. We are not multidisciplinary. We focus on medical sciences, and that's why you can trust us when it comes to share your research with us, because it's very difficult for researchers nowadays with all these journals that are, around predatory publishers, hijacked websites, and so on and so forth. Find a publisher that can, treat your research and make it visible to the world. And with us, you can be certain that our experience can really make a difference and can, share your research with the rest of the world and other researchers. We are very proud of the tradition that we have. We've been publishing some of very important people's works. In the past, you might have heard of Sigmund Freud. We published some of his works. We've published works by Nobel Prize winners. Some of them are still serving on our board of some journals, for example, the Journal of Innate Immunology. So this is also another sign that we are working with some of the best minds out there, and we're really proud of this. I've collected here some figures just to show you how many journals we publish, how many peer reviewers around the world we work with, editors-in-chiefs, editorial board members, and really just to give you a sense of the scope. Even if we are not the biggest publisher out there, we really have a big network of researchers like you worldwide that collaborate together to make these journals, be successful and be ready for you to read and help you with your next research paper. And this is just to give you a snapshot of the areas we cover with our titles, with our journals, and also with our ebooks. Everything from general medicine, public health, oncology, neuroscience. Obviously, these are the broader subject areas. Then, if you are working in a niche area or something that's more interdisciplinary, you'll be able to find journals for those as well. So every type of research you're doing, you'll be able to find a home for it in one of our journals. Our platform is very easy to use. You can, search it, filter, however you want to find exactly what you need. And I've put a QR code here just for you to just very quickly run to the A to Z list of titles that we have in these disciplines. I've also added here a list of the top 5 journals for impact factor and for SiteScore. Obviously, all this information will be on the journals page when you look for them. And I've also added here a snapshot of our Q1, Q2 titles. There's a few more that couldn't fit into the slide, but if you need, we will share the presentation afterwards or a list, and you'll be sure to find a journal that will fit your needs. And we know how important it is for you, especially in India, to publish in this type of journal in Q1, Q2. So should you need the full list, just get in touch and we can share it with you. Once this collaboration will start happening with you guys, it will be, very good for you because you will have access to all our journals, as I mentioned, and also you'll be able to publish in all of them without having to pay APCs on the side. So this is a great opportunity, and I hope you really take advantage of it when the time comes. Apart from the reading and the publishing, as was mentioned earlier, you'll also will have access to 10 courses on our campus platform, and I will go through them a little bit later, but that is also a very good self-paced e-learning platform where you can learn how to learn or have a refresher on if you've already published, how to write a paper, how to write a clinical case report, how to do a systematic review. So very useful for early career researchers, but also established researchers. What is important for you? Well, obviously, you'll be able to get published in international journals without having to pay separate APCs, which is already taking away a big obstacle or barrier that there is between you and the rest of the world when it comes to sharing your discoveries, your research. You will learn how to write and publish effectively, and also how to promote your research afterwards. And you obviously will have free access to cutting-edge medical research that is included in our journals. And this will really help you with your career prospects, and also when it comes to publishing, with the visibility of your work. I just wanted to very quickly cover open access at Karger. My colleague Chris will talk about it later. But just to give you a sense of what we do. For us, open access is very important. It's something that is very important everywhere in the world at the moment. So I don't know how familiar you are with the various types of open access. I have here just a little table to show you the various types that we work with, which are gold, hybrid, platinum, diamond, and green. But really in our journals, let's say half of them basically are fully open access, and the rest offer both open access and subscription in the same journal. So you're sure that you will find a journal where you can publish open access and make your journal more visible to the rest of the global community. That means more visibility, more citation, and being able to reach people that previously would have to pay for a subscription in order to read your research. There's a quick link there to our journal finder. It's already filtered for open access journals, so you can use that to get to the journals that are gold open access. That's just basically the link that I showed you earlier, just to show you how easy it is to filter for open access journals when it comes to our platform. This is a journal that we are really working hard on at the moment. It's an open access journal called Biomedicine Hub. It's multidisciplinary across all the disciplines in health sciences that we cover also with other journals. And we are really working on making this title specifically for early career researchers or people that haven't published yet and would like to start doing that. We take a lot of different type of articles. I think Ines will mention later on about case reports and protocols, all type of articles that maybe are not innovative, but are really helping the groundwork that other people might use to create more research in the future. So I think it's a very interesting title, and we hope that you'll be able to grow it with us. We also have a Fast Facts series. Basically, this is free medical content and information resources that we have on our website, and I invite you to discover it. Basically, this is really towards clinical work. So we cover various pathologies and things that might be useful for you when you start working, and when you want to know more information about special pathologies or issues like that. And all this content comes in various formats. We have podcasts, handbooks, courses, and summary sheets. I think very important are the medical handbooks for you. I've put there a direct link to the list of over 130 handbooks that we have on our platform that you can absolutely download for free. And they are used internationally by healthcare practitioners. For example, in the UK, the NHS has access to it and offers it to all their clinical workers there. And really accessible. So please make sure that you check them out. Now, the part that I was referring to when it comes to education and training. So we have various ways to help researchers like you refresh their knowledge, their skills when it comes to publishing, but also clinical practice. And I'll show you what I mean. So first of all, we're talking about campus, which is what I mentioned earlier. With the agreement with your institution, you'll be able to access these 10 courses. They are online. They are between 60 to 80 minutes long. Each module is quite short. And you can see the various subject areas that we cover with them, between how to conduct ethically sound research, how to review a clinical research paper, for example, and also how to conduct a systematic review, which are some of the most used ones by researchers. And then also for early career researchers, how to choose a target journal or how not to get your paper rejected. Are those are the most used ones. So this will be a great opportunity for you to explore these modules. At the end of each module, you will have to do a little quiz, a little test, and then you receive a certificate of completion once that's done. The cool thing about this platform is that you can jump from one module to another. You can pause, start again whenever you have time, because we know how busy you are. So whenever you have like 5 minutes to spare, that's a great way to train and refresh your skills. This is an example of how one of the modules look when you click into it. So you see it just describes the course, the learning objectives, and then on the right you can see there is like the survey and there's the quiz, and then after that's done you will receive a certificate. We will share a special link to access to it, and thanks to that special link you'll be able to get it without free of charge. And as I mentioned fast facts earlier, the handbooks, we also have free courses connected to the handbook. So once you have read the book, even if you haven't, but if you want to read the book, and then you will be able to find the correspondent course online. These are also very short. They cover specific pathologies. You can see here, for example, postmenopausal osteoporosis. You'll be able to see the video. We're talking an hour-long max as well, and there is a quiz, and some of these courses are accredited internationally. So have a look. This could be very useful for you as well, and there is the direct link to the courses. And finally, the part that I mentioned regarding the training that I organize and the events online. These are absolutely free for everybody. We do them quarterly. The Karger Expert Insights Focus on India series is a new one that we've launched this year. Specific for Indian researchers in mind. We have a Karger editorial member and a guest speaker from India, and usually, we focus on medical sciences, so somebody from some hospital or some university that also serves as editorial board members in one of our journals. And the sessions are very interactive, so we want to interact with researchers like you. We want you to ask us questions so that the expert that already work on journals can answer all your questions. And I think the first event that we had a couple of months ago was very successful. We had over 600 researchers registering, and we had a lot of questions coming in before the event and during. So I really encourage you to participate to the next one that will be on the 16th of October about finding the right journal for your research. And the information that we share are not just Karger related. I mean, we obviously have people from Karger, but they're also a bit neutral, so you can use that knowledge also for other publishers if you wish. We will share the link to the event soon. The other event that is coming up on the 18th of September, so shortly, is part of the Campus by Karger series. So Campus, as I mentioned, is our learning platform. Connected to that and to kind of the subject that we cover on the platform, we also do this series. And the next event is very important. It's about data sharing and transparency, especially for medical sciences and healthcare sciences and research in the medical field. Sharing data is quite daunting because you don't want anybody to steal your research. So this is part of the open science project that we, or movement that we really love. So we have two experts from the Netherlands that will talk about how to the best practice to share your data when it comes to medical data. And I have the QR code link there, but you can see also here. Please feel free to register. If you cannot attend on the day and you have registered, you will receive the recording directly once the event is done. So we're really, really looking forward to see you there and share your questions with us, during the event, and also before that. That's it for my side. This is my link to my contact on LinkedIn. If you want to get in touch, please do connect with me, and I'll be sharing a lot of resources there as well for you. So if you don't have any questions, thank you very much.
Sorry, we are rushing through the slides because we are told that there are a lot of events. We will be happy to come back and do this session again if required. But just to sum up what Fran was saying, the agreement is in process. However, we have set up the trial that gives you access to all our journals, Karger.com. There is one step that is not done yet, wherein when you are submitting your manuscript, you'll get KGMU name, you can select and submit your paper. That helps you get the waiver. Having said that, we can still work out on how you can start submitting your paper. I think by the time a paper is accepted, the agreement should be in place. We'll probably come back to you on how that working will be, but I would encourage you to take a chance and submit the paper. One more point on Biomedicine Hub that Fran mentioned. Biomedicine Hub is a platform, a journal, which is indexed in DOAJ and also PubMed. It is for first-time authors, it's multidisciplinary, and we encourage you to submit. It is peer-reviewed, and it should be a good platform to start your publication journey. Next, we have Ines with us. She's from our editorial team. We wanted to share with you some of the practices that we follow, and in general, just tell you some of the things that an editor looks at when they receive a paper. Ines, if you could.
So yes, I'm from the editorial team at Karger. I'm a publication manager, and I'll be talking more how to prepare the article and plan the research, prepare the article, how to go through to some of the hurdles of registering, replying to reviewers and things like that. So just so that I get a sense of the mix of people here, is there anyone still looking to publish the very first paper, or we only have experience? Okay, that's great. Okay, so you will be very familiar already with this first stage. But what I always recommend when you are thinking about how to prepare a paper, the first or any, is to think about the story. A good paper, like any TV show or movie, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And sometimes even a plot twist. So think about what you are going to focus and how you are going to transmit that to the reader, because that's what gets the readers interested in the paper and interested in following. Oh, so they did this next experience to try to test for that. Did it prove it or disprove it? And get the story going. Of course, once you decide on the topic, I really encourage you to save some time on your day. I know you're busy, but do save time regularly to read. You need to read a lot to build up the literature for your paper, to learn about the topic, to have the references. You need to read a lot. I highly recommend that. So there are many article types out there. The most common one, the research article or the original research article. But there are others that I encourage, especially early career researchers, or if you are right at the beginning of a new project, that I encourage you to explore. For example, I highly recommend to think about publishing protocols, because especially if you are early career, it's a nice way to start publishing, and you don't have any data yet, right? But you can publish the protocol that you will follow if you have already thought through which data I'm going to collect and how I'm going to analyze it. So this is a good first step, and I would even, for transparency practices and open science, is even recommended for any project. So, but talking about a bit the research articles, they report on primary research, and as you should know, probably if you are experienced authors. At Karger, this also includes clinical trials. They have to describe significant and original observations, and they are assessed based on originality. And authors must follow the Equator Network guidelines for research articles, and I include here the link for you to look it up. So, is there anyone here considering to publish an article that is not a research article or an original research? Don't be shy. Okay, we have some hands. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit of a couple other article types. There are more, of course, and if you have questions, feel free to ask them after. So, if you are also clinicians, right, and practitioners, you might see interesting cases that are that present a bit differently from the usual. So publishing a case report can be useful. They are shorter formats, so they take a shorter amount of time to prepare as well. So if you are juggling multiple things like practitioner seeing patients plus research plus exams, that this can be a nice article type to explore. They present significant new insights or cases with unusual courses, and they should provide a new perspective on a recognized clinical scenario or represent an entirely new clinical condition, of course. Case reports must always have ethical approval, patient consent, obviously, and they must be submitted together with the care checklist. Okay. So I invite you to check this checklist later on. There are also the less commonly known registered reports. And registered reports are basically a two-part article. You first register your protocol, you submit your protocol and you publish it. And then if you follow that protocol, you publish the results in that journal, irrespective if the results are negative or inconclusive. Okay. So the idea behind registered reports is so that there's space for negative results and inconclusive results, because we know a lot of journals ignore the negative results because it's not novel, right? But there's a need to know when something doesn't work or it's not related, right? So that other people don't repeat the same work. So the idea is to improve transparency and to give a chance to authors to publish their results. And we know that sometimes you have, 4 years to do a project, you reach the end, your results are negative or inconclusive, you don't have other 4 years to collect more data, right? So I invite you to explore this option. Also, another thing this allows you is that when you publish the results, you cite the protocol. So it's also good for you in terms of citations. So as for clinical trials that you need registration, registered reports also require registration. That's not so well known, but it's relatively easy to do. You have some resources here that you can explore, and I already explained you the benefits of going through the process of registering the protocol. It might seem it's an extra step, but then you guarantee the publication of the results. So it might be useful. Think about it. Okay. So pre-registration is just one of the steps recommended on open science regarding open science practices. These are recommendations from UNESCO. You have the website there if you want to learn more about it. But there are other open science practices that they recommend, like involving citizen scientists or specific patient groups, publishing prints, sharing data, sharing code publicly, and other recommendations. So the question is, how do we share data and code, right? That's easy to let to the end when the article is about to be submitted to think of, but we actually recommend to start thinking about how you are going to do this when you are planning which data you are going to collect and how. So very, very early on, because then you can collect the data and save it in a way that when it's ready, it's already prepared and formatted as you need to submit to the repository. So of course, especially if we are thinking about patient data and so on, you have to think what's ethically and legally shareable, and what's allowed by the owner, so the patient, and what are the requirements of funders. Does the funder require that it's shared or not? Right. When it comes to where to share this, there are the institutional repositories, but there are also specialty specific, like Binding DB for protein and stuff. And there are generalists like Figshare, GitHub, and others. If any good repository should have a unique and persistent identifier, like the DOI for articles, so that the data is findable, citable, so it needs that identifier. If you are not sure if a repository is good or not, if you should use it or not, look for the Core Trust Seal. Okay, this is a certification that gives you some guarantee that the repository is good for this. If you haven't necessarily, you already have data and so on, don't worry, you can still, generally journals and publishers have agreements with some repositories and will allow you to put the data once you submit the article to the repository. Okay. And again, when should you start thinking about this? Very early on, because then you can collect the data and have everything prepared and spend less time thinking at the end, oh, now I have to format all the data, or I have to anonymize that, or I have to, like you have done everything that is needed to just upload, and that's it. So now you have planned your project. You have thought about the data that you would collect. You have decided on a method to analyze it. You have everything. You are ready to start writing the paper. Okay. Now the very question in everyone's mind is, and please raise your hand, if you think it's acceptable to use generative AI to write a paper. Anyone? Okay, we have a few hands, okay? And to do data analysis for you. Less hands. Oh, okay. Okay. And to write a literature review. Okay, good. So I can tell you that the answer for all these three questions is yes and no. I'm sorry, but this is the only answer at this moment. The models might improve. The problem is you definitely are more productive using generative AI for any of these three things. The only difficulty is that you need to have already an understanding of the topic, and you need to know how the methodology is applied and what it should give you, because otherwise you have no idea if the output makes sense or not. And you will not be able to look for errors coming from the limitations of the current models. Okay, so yes, you can do all this, but you need previous knowledge. And not only on the topic and the methodology, you also need knowledge on how to prompt, how to ask questions to generative AI. Because we know that if you ask the question in a positive way, it will give a positive answer. If you ask the question in a negative way, it will give a negative answer. So you have to be aware of these limitations to use it properly and actually become productive. So one last one. Is it okay to use generative AI to correct spelling and grammar errors. Okay, we have more hands, and you are correct. And in fact, it's already being done. This is an example from an article published in one of our journals where the author simply acknowledged the use of Grammarly for editing English language. So the main thing to keep in mind is if you use generative AI at any point for anything, please write it down in the article. Okay? So at the moment, all publishers are requiring a policy of disclosure, okay? So that editors and reviewers can assess how it was used and ask for more information if needed, and so on, okay? So these authors did great, right? Okay, so as I was saying, generative AI does have limitations. Let's go a bit over them. One is authorship and accountability. So generative AI, any model cannot be an author. And the reason is the model cannot be accountable for the output, right? And an author, by definition, is accountable for the content on his or her article, okay? Another aspect is privacy, intellectual property, and copyright, especially in the medical field. You have to be very careful what you give a model, especially if you are using tools online. If you don't have access to a tool that ensures confidentiality, usually the paid versions, please do not upload patient data. Do not upload, I would even say, your article or things like that, because it no longer belongs to you. It might end up in the output of someone else in the other side of the world. Okay, what you give a model online, it belongs. It's incorporated to the model. Okay, so it's no longer yours. For specific scientific publishing, as I said, there's policies of disclosure of AI use. So keep that in mind, because in scientific publishing is very important to keep the integrity of the data and the literature. And finally, we all know that generative AI models use a data training set, and this data has bias. We have to be honest. For example, in the medical field, we know that a lot of the data collected in the past was only collected in men, not in women, for example, right? So the model will have this bias because it was trained on this data, even if we don't realize it. So if we are not aware of this, we might just be perpetuating the bias. Okay, so we have to be very careful with what we are using and how, and assessing the output of it. So what we recommend is, if you are thinking about using generative AI for any of the steps, think about these 5 points. And if you cannot guarantee one of them, if you are not sure about one of these points, don't use it. Okay? At this point in time, this might change because the models are always evolving and, you know, new policies, whatever. But at this point in time, they are not the outputs are not reproducible. There is bias, so either you have ways of testing for that, of showing that you are not integrating bias or that you are getting a reproducible result, don't use it. Okay, so now you have written a paper. Now you have to select a journal to submit and to get it published. And I'm going to tell you, when I was a PhD student, I typically went to my PI, my principal investigator, and told me, submit to this journal. And I was, okay. I didn't know any better. But, and usually the recommendations of your mentors and professors are good, of course. But I hope to give you some tools for you to explore on your own. Because there are, new models of journals and things like that. And sometimes they might be better for your articles. So I'm hoping with the next few slides, I give you some tools that are useful for this. So when you are thinking about selecting a journal, consider the needs of your article first. Okay, and I will explain what this means. Check, of course, database indexing, journal metrics. You have to keep in mind if there are specific requirements. For example, your funder or institution might require you to publish open access. So you have to go for a journal that allows you to publish open access, for example. And of course, you have to put this in the context of fees. So if you are expected to pay fees, can you pay for the fees or not, right? So what are the needs of your article? What is the right audience for your article? And I will give you a little bit of a personal example that I hope explains the right audience aspect for your article. So my PhD was on evolutionary biology, a lot of genetics, genomics, but I was studying the evolution of salt tolerance in rice. Okay? So every time I wrote a paper, the question came up. Do I mostly want geneticists to read this paper, or I want plant scientists to read this paper, or even agronomists to read this paper? There are good journals for any of these three fields, and there are some that overlap, but typically an agronomist doesn't read a plant science journal, or a geneticist doesn't read an agronomist journal, that's for sure, right? So I had to think every time what was the story of my article and who I wanted to target. Because if you target the right people, the right readers, you get more chances of citations, right? Because they are the ones interested in that story. So, and I imagine a lot of you also work in fields that can go to different places. So if you aren't sure what's the audience, what are the readers of a journal, I encourage you to read articles published in that journal. So just because the journal is called Cardiology, typically, because of the editorial board and the editor-in-chief in place, they will have a certain preference for certain topics because it's the topic that the editor-in-chief is more related to, whatever, right? If you read the papers that were published there, that will give you an idea who is reading that journal. Okay? So do go through the process of thinking who are the readers, who are the people that I want reading my paper. Okay. Then, of course, if you require fast publication, sometimes students need publications for an upcoming examination or something like that. In this case, you need to really look for the metrics of time of a journal. I will talk about that a little bit later, but also I encourage you to look for online first and early view. So these terms mean, early view means that after the article is accepted, it is immediately findable and citable in its accepted format. Even while it's going through typesetting and copy editing by the publisher, it can already be cited, okay? Online first, it means for the journals that still have printed issues, your article doesn't have to wait to be included in a printed issue to be findable and citable and so on. So if time is of the essence, I encourage you to look for journals that have these two things in place. And finally, is your article suitable or does it require publication extenders? And what's a publication extender? So publication extender is anything built on top of your article that is not the article itself. Okay? They are more and more common, especially now that people are focused on impact. What's the impact of your research? What's the impact of this researcher? What's the impact of an institution? And impact is not only citations. Impact is actually patents, policy documents, changes of clinical practices, and a number of things. Which means you have to reach people that are not scientists, that are not medical people. And they have to understand what you've done. You need to change, you need to reach people that influence policy or that are patients. So extenders allow you to reach other researchers faster in a simpler way, or lay audiences or other target groups. So one of the most common ones at the moment is plain language summary. This is a summary without jargon, without references. It's very simple. You describe what you've done in the article, when that research, and what were the conclusions, but in very, so for a lay audience, without any jargon or complex terms. Another very common one is visual abstracts. This can be quite useful if you are active on social media and you want to share in a visual way, a very quick way as well, what your article is about. You can also use visual abstracts when applying for grants. If you have previous research that you want the people of evaluating grant to quickly, instead of having to read the paper, quickly assess what the paper is about, you can include a visual abstract in the application. So they can be quite useful. But there are others and more coming up. So there's science animation, there's podcasts, there's augmented reality. We have some cool articles at Karger journals where you, with a specific app on your cell phone, you point at an image and you can see a 3D heart or the end or whatever the image is about. Okay, so going back to selecting a journal, you have to check the database indexing and the journal model. The journal model refers to if you need to publish open access, you need to make sure that the model allows for open access publication. Okay, so this is a very basic one. I'm not going to go into much detail. Chris will talk about more open access afterwards. For indexing, there are health science specific databases like PubMed, PubMed Central, and Medline. And there's multidisciplinary, everyone knows Web of Science that gives impact factor, but there's also Scopus that gives site score. And if you are looking to a journal and considering submitting to a journal that you don't know yet, really always look and check if the journal is a member of COPE. And don't trust the website of the journal. Go to the site of COPE and check if the journal is listed there. Okay? COPE is an organization that checks for quality and transparency in journals, so all good journals are members of COPE. Okay? And you have the resources here, so if you want to go to COPE, I encourage you. So when thinking about metrics, of course, we all tend to think about citation metrics. There's the journal impact factor, which is very well known. Web of Science also released in 2021 journal citation indicator that standardizes within the field, because you might not know this, but for example, plant science or agronomy has much less citations than medical fields, right? So comparing an agronomy journal in terms of total number of citations with a medical journal makes no sense at all. It's just a field that, they are fields that were completely different from each other in terms of citations and so on, and patterns of citations. So this journal citation indicator was a way to normalize within the field, and then you can you can trust the comparisons of journals that are in the same field. Okay. Site score by Scopus, you are probably very familiar as well, is similar to journal impact factor. And there's Imago journal rank indicator as well. But there are other metrics that probably all good journals also share. on their websites, which are time to first decision. Well, it might not be all of this, but some of this will be on the home pages of a journal: the time to first decision, time to final decision, time to publication, and acceptance rate, for example. Okay. So these all help you have an overview of a journal if you are considering it for your article. Okay, so you submit your article and then peer review starts. And typically, the first step that happens is that your article will go to a pre-evaluation. And there can be, and most of the rejections are at this stage, especially if you are aiming for Q1, Q2 journals, so high impact journals. Believe me, most of the rejections are right here at submission. They don't even go to reviewers. And there is a reason. The reason is reviewers are people like you. They are busy as well. So we want to save their time if the article cannot be published in that journal. Okay. A rejection here, I will in the next slides give you the reasons for how the typical reasons why articles are rejected in these two different stages. If the article is allowed to go to peer review, then it will be sent to reviewers. They have some time to assess the article and prepare review reports, and then that is evaluated by the editor, sent to the authors. There's on average 2 rounds of these. The article can still be rejected, of course, or accepted at this point. So if you have an article under peer review and you get reviewers' comments, and I've experienced that myself, it can be soul crushing. It can be devastating. You are like, oh, I finished the article, I submitted it, and now these people don't get it at all. So just breathe in, breathe out, go for a walk, go search for a more positive mindset, and then come back and be sure to reply in the best way possible to reviewers. And what I mean by this is that because people are tired at this point, they tend to use shortcuts and to reply, done. I guarantee you, when this goes back to the reviewer, he no longer remembers the article, what he asked, for what reason he asked, at all. So they will have to spend time, okay, what was my request? What the done means? And then look through the article to see what do they mean with done. So it's not ideal. If you want to speed up the peer review time, make sure you reply point by point. You are as specific as possible. So for example, you say on line 171, I added information about protein X and Y. And then it will be clear to the reviewer what you've done to address that point. Okay? So be as specific as possible. Typically, there are at least 2 reviewers. So if you see that there are common concerns, draw parallels between that. It shows the editor that you are thinking critically about the review comments and not only going point by point and adding something to a sentence. And so it shows that you are thinking about actually what are the comments, are common concerns that I can address, and how am I going to address them. And finally, write a summary paragraph. This is particularly important for the editor, because the reviewers will go point by point, but the editor relies more on the reviewer's comments. Okay? And if he has concerns, then he might go to specific answers, to point by point, but he will rely more on the summary paragraph from the authors and on the comments that the reviewers leave to the editor based on that, okay? You have some resources here also from other sources. Feel free to explore them. Okay, so finally, you get you get the decision, and there's 4 types. There's accepted, the best one. There's minor revisions, major revisions, and rejected. And I have to tell you, the worst of them is major revision. Because if it's rejected, you can move on. You can go to a different journal, but major revisions sometimes are really hard to reply to, because sometimes the answer is, yeah, I need another 4 years to collect data and answer that. So there, I cannot help you, I'm sorry. You have to find a way to still justify this as valuable to the reviewers and the editor. Okay, so the most typical reasons for rejection before review, so what we call sometimes desk rejections. An article is not in scope of the journal. As I said before, because the journal, and I'm giving examples, okay? Because the journal is called Cardiology, it doesn't mean it typically publishes literally everything that could be classified as cardiology. So take the time to understand what the journal publishes to try to avoid this reason for rejection. Insufficient contribution to the field or lack of novelty. This is particularly important if you're aiming for high impact journals, because of course they want novelty in almost all their articles. Okay, so be aware of that. Manuscript is poorly written and difficult to follow. Let's hope Grammarly and others help overcome this this rejection reason. And research integrity and ethical concerns. Every publisher tests every article submitted for plagiarism and other things. So it's not even worth it. There are tools online you can test yourself before you submit if you are unsure if your article will be flagged. It will be flagged and it will be stopped at this stage. Okay. So typical rejection reasons after review, and these are the ones that are hard to reply. So methodological issues, poor study design, insufficient controls, lack of power, insufficient statistics, lack of demonstration of causality, insufficient validation. These are the hard ones, okay? Sometimes you have to soften the wording of conclusion. You cannot say X causes Y, because you don't have enough data. You just can say it might cause Y, but more research is needed. And sometimes that's enough, sometimes it's not. You have to see what's the specific case. And finally, another common rejection reason after review is failure to address reviewers' comments. So do go through the process of replying the best way possible. Point by point, summarizing, drawing parallels. So, if your article is accepted, unfortunately, you are still not done as an author. You are close to it, but not done. So the article will be, in most cases, early view, as I mentioned, but not all journals have it. And then you will have the author's proofs. And I know you are tired by now, you just want to be done. You can no longer read this article anymore because you've read it so many times, but do check the proofs carefully. We've had cases where we had to issue an erratum because an author's name was misspelled. So nothing at all to do with the content, nothing at all to do with the science, but it still had to be fixed. But once it's published, we, the publisher, are not allowed to touch it anymore. So if changes are needed, you need an erratum. And it's a bit unfortunate to need an erratum for, a misspelled name or something like that. So do go through the proofs as carefully as you can. If you can, ask a co-author to check if you are so tired of it that you need another set of eyes or something like that, okay? Then this is the step where most publishers, or at least good publishers, will invoice. And it depends if you have agreements or not, if your institutions have agreements or not. You might not even have to go through this step. The article will be online first if it's a journal, a printed journal, and finally you have the full publication with the number, the issue number, and the pages numbers and so on. Okay. And that is it for me. Please let me know if you have questions. I'll be available later on. Okay.
Okay, thanks everyone. So I'm going to close the session with just two short topics that we wanted to talk about. The first of which is a different aspect of generative AI in scientific papers, and lastly, just a brief touching on the open access section as well. So, what Ines was covering in the talk there, which is probably the most important question that you have on your minds as researchers, is if I'm an author, how can I use generative AI in the research writing process? But there's another aspect to it, which is about, obviously, when you're in the shoes of being a reader and reading an article, is how you can tell if generative AI has been used in an article that you're reading. And what Ines described is that if the researcher is following the right practices, they will have acknowledged that within the article, and hopefully that you're publishing with a reputable publisher that holds these kind of standards. But the problem that we see increasingly at the moment is the growth of fake science. And so this is where generative AI is used to create fake figures that can be used to falsify research, or worse than that, creating papers as a whole, which are entirely fake. There's no research and they're being used just to try and increase publication metrics. And look, it's a really big problem. I don't think there's an easy answer to this because the rate of change is so fast, and you will all know how quickly generative AI is moving in general. We do quite a lot of checks to try and make sure these things don't exist. But what I also just really wanted to briefly touch on now was also to give you some kind of telltale clues that you can look for if you're reading an article and you feel in some way suspicious that generative AI might have been used in creating that paper in the first instance. So what I'm going to show you now is I'm going to show you 4 figures, some of which are real figures that we published in our journals, some of which are fake that we created using generative AI. And I'll give you a couple of moments to look at them. And I wonder if any of you might want to guess here if they think this is a real figure or if this is something which is fake, that's been created using generative AI. Anyone? I'll ask it that way around. Does anyone think this is fake from generative AI, and what clues they might see within that? Okay, so I'll tell you this one. So this one is a fake figure. This was created using generative AI. And there's a couple of things that you can look for in here as clues. So first of all, if you look at the 2 charts in C and D, so the bars are the same size, same color, but the scale is different. And that's not completely impossible, but it does seem a bit strange that you've got 2 charts that look identical with a different scale. And also you can see that there's no legends against the axis at all. So it kind of gives the impression that there's no substance behind those. Not impossible, but it's just something which looks strange. The other thing I think within this is I think most of you will recognize, or many of you will recognize image A, which I think is a Western blot. Image B is something which is kind of has no scientific basis at all. It's a kind of green circle with some blue dots in the middle. And, if you see something where an image is included that you can't understand why that's there, it just seems to be an image that's in there, it's an indication that that's something that's potentially been falsified for some strange reason. And so it's just something that you can look out for if you're reading something and you feel a bit suspicious. If you can't understand the reason why the image is in the figure, then it's an indication that potentially generative AI has been used in the creation of that. So that's my first example. This is example B. Anyone feel this one might be a fake figure and see anything within this one? Okay, so I'll tell you, this one is real. So yeah, we did actually publish this one in our journals. I think this is it was in the nephrology journal, so it's some stains from the sections of the kidney. But yeah, this one is a genuine figure, and yeah, pleased to say that because we did publish it in our journals. How about image figure 3. Anyone want to have a guess at this? Any detectives out there that might have a sense with this one? Okay, so I'll tell you, this one is fake as well. And there's 3 things that you can look out for in this one. So first of all, I think that the text around the p-test is kind of gobbledygook. You can't really make that out, and it's really unclear what it actually says. So it's kind of, the text is not correctly generated. Neither is the text down the side of the legend, down the side of the axis, sorry. The other 2 things that you can see, now I'm not an expert in the subject area, but the bottom right-hand chart talks about the medulla cast, which is something I don't think actually exists. Some of you may know that already, but obviously if you're looking at something and you think, I don't even know what that is, you're likely to be a specialist. And there, again, it could be that generative AI has just been used to create some dummy text, and that would give you a clue that this is potentially fake. The other thing, which is actually quite difficult to make out probably, but within the images in the top 2 boxes, you'll see there are some yellow arrows, and the yellow arrows are really kind of fuzzy and not very distinct, and obviously the point of an arrow is it's supposed to be very specific. So if you start to see kind of fuzzy images and fuzzy arrows, that's a sort of indication that something might have been used, generative AI might have been used. Okay, last image as well. So this is anyone want to have a guess or might see a clue that this might be fake? Okay, I'm going to tell you this one as well then. So this one is actually real. The reason we bring this one up is because some people do think this one is fake, because if you look at some of the text in the green label there, it kind of looks slightly like gobbledygook, but it's referring to something quite specific from a scientific perspective. So it's really, I guess, just trying to prove that it's quite difficult to identify those things, but hopefully within the images there are some things that you can look out for, just if you're feeling suspicious in the first instance that something might be awry with what you're reading. As well as the images, the other thing that you can look at is some phrases that you can see within the text. So there's been the rise of these things called tortured phrases, which are like awkward translations of genuine scientific terms. And so it's taken a scientific term and translated it in a really clumsy way, and it comes across as really awkward. So these 7 phrases here are taken from a Nature article. Not that Nature published it, but they actually found these phrases were used in scientific articles, not Karger articles, let's say. And these are the tortured phrases are down the left-hand side there. And so one more quiz for you all. I wonder if some of you might be able to guess what the actual phrase was for each of these. So the first one, counterfeit consciousness. Anyone want to have a guess at what the actual phrase was here? What was the... Artificial intelligence, correct. Yeah, I was going to say that's the one we should get in this context. Bosom malignancy, maybe an easier one. Breast cancer, correct. Kidney disappointment. Kidney failure, yeah. DNA fix. That's DNA repair, yeah, I think we heard that one at the back there. DNA hurt. Which you could probably guess now is DNA damage, yeah. The last 2 I kind of think are the best, but lactose bigotry, yeah, lactose intolerance. The last one is the best. I really want someone to get this actually. We've tried 2 or 3 times and no one's got it yet, but it's the most amusing, I think, for some reason. But so invulnerable framework is immune system. And so So you'll see some of these phrases, and so it's just another real clue that potentially generative AI has been used. And look, I'm sure the tools and things are going to improve in terms of being able to detect this, but there's some clues that might help you when you're reading articles. Okay, my last session, I'm going to topic very quickly. Just wanted to talk about open access, given that it's one of the key focus that we've talked about within the agreement potentially with KGMU. And so, one thing that I'm really conscious with open access is that in publishers, we talk about it all the time and we use all these different phrases. For you as researchers, you're worrying about your research and your patients. And, I think some of the phrases that we use are sometimes confusing and lots of publishers don't describe it well on their website. So I really wanted to quickly run through it just to give you some information that might help you to take a decision when you're thinking about publishing an article in relation to open access. So, you will all know, I'm sure, what open access is. So it's a model for journal and publishing that's aimed to make scientific research freely available to all. In really basic terms, it takes the traditional subscription model where authors would usually be able to publish for free and then the reader would then pay to read that article, and changes it on its head. So effectively, authors generally pay to publish the article and then the article becomes free to read around the world. And you will all be able to identify the benefits. We see increased usage and citations from the visibility. The impact there tends to be faster impact for the research. And that increased visibility means that you can support better public engagement and wider interdisciplinary research where those researchers, people might not have had access to the content in the past. So when we're talking about open access, the main thing we usually talk about, and it's the most important aspect, I'm sure, is the free-to-read aspect. But open access really included two different aspects to it. It was about being free to read and also about being free to reuse. So it meant that authors can reuse other authors' work and they can understand how they can do that and do that for free. It's a really admirable goal that we're aiming for from an open access perspective, but it's also quite challenging. And so what's happened is a number of models have evolved and a number of different approaches to support this. And that's where I think some of the confusion comes. And so I'm going to very briefly run through those that might just give you a guide when you're hearing these phrases and thinking about where you might publish, what it's referring to in those instances. So talking first about the free-to-read aspect. So when we talk about different open access models, there's really like three main flavors that we talk about. There's gold open access, platinum or diamond open access, which are effectively interchangeable, and green open access. And we usually differentiate those down around these three different areas, or you can differentiate them using these three areas. The platform where the article appears, the article type that's used, and the funding model. So in the gold model and the platinum and diamond model, the platform is the journal. So this is where you're publishing an article on an open access basis in the journal itself. Green open access is much more about self-archiving. So this is usually where someone's publishing an article in a journal and then they're depositing a different version of their article in an institutional repository to support an open access approach that they might want to take. So in this sense, gold and platinum are very similar, green is quite different. In terms of the article type, so again, gold and platinum are the same, they're published in a journal, so it means that the open access version is the actual published journal article. It will be permanently free to read, and it will be OA immediately on publication in both those first two options. Again, green is slightly different in this instance, since that usually, and I mean usually, because different publishers do have different policies and different institutions have different approaches, but it's more likely that the accepted manuscript is being used in this instance. So someone is publishing an article in a journal on a subscription basis, and they might deposit the accepted manuscript in their institutional repository to support open access. And often that will happen after an embargo period as well, so there may be a 12-month delay in sharing that via the institutional repository. And then the third aspect is thinking about the funding aspect. So from a gold perspective, it's usually through article publication charges that are paid by an author, an institution, or a funder. In the platinum and the diamond model, this is the difference between the gold model, is that all of the costs are usually covered by a sponsoring organisation. So this would be examples where an organisation decides that they want to sponsor a whole publication, and in that sense they cover all of the reading and the publishing aspect, which is the most obviously desirable model. It's also the one that I hate to tell you is the least used as well. It's just there's not many examples of it yet because it has many more challenges from a sponsorship perspective. And with green open access, there's no additional costs for the open access because that's really an author depositing in their institutional repository. Do we have a question? Oh, sorry, I thought we had a question. So yeah, that was just a really brief overview of the different models, and you'll hear people talking about those. And the free to reuse aspect as well. So as said, this is a really important aspect of open access. When you make something freely available, what's important is that as an author, you can define how you want that article to be reused by other people. Because if it's freely available on the internet, people will not sure how they can reuse that. And the way that we usually do that is using Creative Commons licenses, which you're probably familiar with, but they're not specific to publishing or open access. They're used for lots of different types of things that are available online. And I put here a box that's actually available from the Creative Commons website, and I invite you to have a look at it if you're interested, because there's lots of different ways that you can use it. But what I'd say to you is that if you're thinking about it from an open access perspective, there's really just 3 licenses you need to be aware of, okay? And sometimes when we describe them, they sound more complicated than they actually are, but they're actually quite straightforward. The first is a CC BY license. So this is effectively saying, if you publish an article and you make it open access and you publish it under a CC BY, a Creative Commons BY license, that means that it's free to be reused by anyone as long as they attribute the original work. So you can do anything that you like with it. You can take the article apart. You could sell the article if you wanted. It's just that you need to attribute the original work in all instances. The second is a CC BY NC. The CC BY remains the same. You need to attribute the original work. The only difference here is that as an author, you can say you can't reuse this for commercial reasons. So you can limit someone from selling the article, or can get a bit complicated in the pharmaceutical world and things like that. But that's a way as an author you can restrict the use to non-commercial reasons only. And the third, which is really much less used, and so I wouldn't give too much thought to this, which is a CC BY NC and D. And that's, again, the same. Need to attribute the original work, non-commercial basis. And the only additional element here is it's a non-derivative, which means that the author has said you can't change the version of the article in any way. So you need to use the article in full. And this usually comes about this comes out in really exceptional cases, and so I wouldn't think about it too much. The 2 examples I can think of are where sometimes government research insists that it has to be used in full, and it's only in specific cases. There are some other instances where I know people had concerns about the misuse of the science in the future. They were concerned that if people used parts of that article, then it might not represent the full science, and so they insisted on a non-derivative license. But I would say if you're looking at publisher websites and you're thinking about this CC aspect, the first 2 will cover probably 95% of the cases that you need. So hopefully those 2 things just give you a bit of a guide when you're looking at publisher websites and thinking about open access and what you might want to do to fulfill your requirements. But we're hoping that we can finalise the agreement with KGMU. I just wanted to let you know what it would mean in terms of OA publishing. And so, hopefully for Karger journals, it would be very easy. Effectively, students and researchers in KGMU would be able to publish an article on an open access basis in any Karger journal without needing to publish to pay an APCs. My box was going to appear before that. I'll put it up. Yeah, so what we try and do is make it really simple. All of our journals are included, all of the article types are included, and so effectively you can just think about where do I want to submit my article and not to be concerned about whether does it qualify for open access, does it not qualify for open access. We want to make it as easy as possible. So all Karger journals have an open access option and you can publish in any of those. The one thing, which is for a later stage really, but it's just important if we have the agreement in place, is that you make it clear that you're from KGMU, because that's how we identify that you should have your APC waived. And if for any reason you use a different affiliation, it can be difficult to sometimes pick that up. But generally we try and make that as easy as possible. I think as well, as Priyank touched on earlier on, I think usually what we do is think about it at acceptance time as well. So let's see how time pans out, but I don't want you to fear that if you submitted an article now and if 3 months it was accepted, if the agreement was in place, then of course it would be covered by the agreement as well. We'd be happy to include that. So that hopefully would make it very easy with Karger journals. And I would just say, for any other publisher, hopefully those parts that I was talking about earlier on gives you a bit of a guide in how you might make your selection. But check the open access policy for the journal you hope to submit to, and check for any open access agreements you might have in place or policies in your organisation that might encourage open access in one form or another. So we will stop there and say, thanks first of all for listening, but we're really happy now to stay and take any questions that you might have. So I'll hand you back to Priyank, I think.
Thank you, Chris. We tried to keep this presentation as neutral and also tell you a little bit of what we are trying to do at KGMU. We're open for questions. Chris, Ines, and if you could come in front, we can probably take some questions from the audience if you have any, or I could ask them some questions. Rarely you get a chance to ask your boss a question. You might as well make use of the platform. Any questions from anybody on anything that you've heard today? Did you find the session useful? Did you want to see the platform? Do you think we should have done something different? Please share the feedback with the libraries. But yes, even here, if you think that we could have done this differently, it would be really good to know. Typically, we want something positive to come out of the discussions that we do. So yes, please, if there is any feedback, please do share. Any questions, anybody? Okay. Looks like we've done a good job, or we have done a really bad job. But I have some questions based on whatever I've heard here and some of the other places. Maybe it'll help them. Maybe I could ask you some questions, Ines. You mentioned use of AI and some acceptable practices. Do you think, I've written a paper, now I want to just have ChatGPT look up the paper and see what it feels. Is it okay to upload my entire paper and have ChatGPT give its comments before I submit the paper?
So if you are using online tools, you cannot ensure confidentiality, which means if you are uploading your paper before it's published, you lose it. It can show up elsewhere. Part of it in full, you know, so unless again you have access to tools that ensure confidentiality, do not upload your full article before it's published.
And does this extend to Grammarly as well? Do you upload the entire paper or do you only do sections of paper that you feel want rephrasing?
So again, if you have access to a tool that ensures confidentiality, yeah, go ahead and upload the full paper. If not, at the very minimum, I recommend uploading parts of it and not the full thing together. You try to break it down a bit. The ideal situation, you have access to a tool that you can trust will not end your article will not end elsewhere.
If I am a reviewer and I've received the paper, is it okay to upload that paper and get reviewer comments on it and then edit it on my version?
So publishers are exploring ways of having these tools assist reviewers and editors, because we all know if they can become more productive, we shorten the time. Of course, it's ideal for everyone. At the moment, we don't have anything in place. And again, if you don't have access to a tool that is confidential, and if the publisher is not aware, don't do it.
On one of the slides, you said you should look at time to publish. I hear this very often. I've submitted a paper, I've received this email, I've submitted the paper, and it got published in 3 days. Is it even real? What should I look for? What are the real challenges with somebody offering a publication within 5 days, let's say, or 10 days?
So full peer review is impossible in 5 days. I'm sorry. Even with a very, very short article, like a letter or something like that. So for us, on average, there are outliers, some that are faster, some that are small. Exactly. So on average, about 3 months. To go to, because on average also we see 2 rounds of going to reviewers, back to authors, going to reviewers, back to authors. This is the typical article, as I said, you can go outside these. But for the initial assessment, will the article go to peer review or not? It typically goes to a week. It depends a bit on the editor-in-chief, the volume of the journal, of course. But that shouldn't take more than about a week to get the reply. So the initial either rejection or yes, proceed. Regarding
regarding the study protocol publication, is it mandatory to submit the original research subsequently to the same journal, or we can submit to the other journal?
So not all journals consider protocols, but the ones that do consider protocols, you don't have to do it in the same journal. You can publish the protocol and do the research. If you do a registered report, which then requires the journal to commit to publishing the results, even if they are negative or inconclusive, then that's typically in the same journal because there's that commitment. Okay, if you decide just to publish a protocol, but you can still do it, you still do practice, but it's not a registered report, then there's no commitment from the journal that it will publish results.
I would have loved to continue questioning, but since you guys don't have any more questions and we've run out of time, we are still here outside. If anybody of you want to ask one-on-one questions, we'll be available outside. Happy to take questions. I just want to repeat one more time, the access to all our journals are available on Karger.com. Should you have any issues in accessing the journal, please let us know or the library know, and we will try and ensure that you get the articles required. You can start submitting. I think the campus access, the courses, the 10 courses that we are talking about is also set up. We would require you to go through a dedicated link that recognizes you being a part of KGMU. If you go through any other link, it may ask you for money at the time of registry. I think Fran mentioned it. We have one step on our website which requires you to use your first name and last name and ideally your KGMU email address to register. If you do that, it really solves a lot of problems. You can use it on while submission. It can also help you while you are using the Karger campus programs. That's it for today. I really appreciate you taking the time, listening to us and giving us this opportunity to come and present. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Right, well, thank you, Priyank, thank you, Christian, Anish, and Francesca for coming here and introducing us to this. I think we are still working on that trial link. I don't know if it is ready or not. But see, we are trying to procure this APC agreement with Karger. The purpose is to increase the publication output from the university. Our Vice Chancellor Madam and the Dean QNP have been trying to various ways to increase the publication output from the university, which is one of the very important factors in our NIRF ranking, which recently we have improved. So we are trying to get the trial link online. As soon as it is online, we will notify everyone, all the faculty and the residents in the university, and we can then go ahead. Meanwhile, we'll get the paperwork done. And if you guys have any questions, you can come to me or any of the library staff with those questions. Right. Thank you so much for your time.
Ask